Welcome to the Big Blue Radio Show, coming to you on Tulsa Community College's online radio station, The Grid, and on the Creativity Channel, Cox Cable Channel 21. I'm Greg Stone, Provost of TCC's Metro Campus in downtown Tulsa.
And I'm Lee Goodson, President of Tulsa Community College. Our guest today is Eunice Tarver, TCC's new Assistant Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion. She's going to visit with us today about the importance of having an inclusive teaching and learning environment for students.
Eunice Tarver is our guest today on the Big Blue Radio Show.
Well, we're really excited to have you here today, and in your new role as Assistant Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion?
Yes.
I got that right.
Yes.
And it's sort of a re-envisioning of how TCC looks at diversity and inclusion and community engagement, both inside the college and what we do outside of the college. Can you talk to us just a little bit about where you think we've come to up to this point in the college's history and what kind of visions you have to bring us to in the future?
Great, yes, and thank you for having me here today as well. Excited to be here. And so I think that we've done a fabulous job historically on our focus on diversity. So it's been amazing to be able to walk into a position and kind of look at some of our data points and see that, wow, we are already at a point where 37% of our student population fall into the underrepresented category. And so that is due to the great work of Tony Alonzo and his team prior to me coming into this position. So I'm very excited about that. And then I think focus for the future is I'm really excited about the work that we can do focusing on retention and completion. And so really wanting to move the needle in that area so that we are truly setting our students up for success to be able to go out into our community, staying in Tulsa or moving outside of Tulsa, but what they're going to do as far as economic impact with an associate's degree from Tulsa Community College. So really trying to repurpose our positions and our roles and our functions so that we can truly support the student success of all of our students, and then also specializing attention to our underserved and underrepresented student populations.
Eunice, what was it about this position that intrigued you? You know, why, sort of that typical interview question, why do you want to apply for this job? And what opportunities do you see in it for Tulsa Community College?
So I am currently wrapping up my coursework for my PhD. And this is such an amazing opportunity to move into a position where I'm going to be able to actualize all of that theory that you learn. And so the opportunity to bring the theory to practice is very exciting. I specialize in social foundations of education. So that program is an interdisciplinary program that focuses on the diverse factors of the educational experience. So it's all about looking through various lenses, a historical lens, a philosophical lens, a sociological lens, a psychological lens. So we take those lenses and then we just really look at how do those experiences of gender, ethnicity, age, ability, sexual orientation, how do those things work into the educational experience? And then you take that and you expand it outside of the educational institution, and what's the impact of education on our society? So spending 50 plus hours in the classroom preparing for this work, and then having the opportunity to lead the college in that area of really truly building this educational space where all students have this equitable experience and that we are setting them up again for success. That's what it's all about. So I'm just so excited to be able to have that opportunity.
Can you talk, you mentioned the word equitable. Can you talk a little bit about what is the difference between equity and equality?
Okay, great question. So equality means that we are giving everyone the same opportunity to be successful based on the same experience. So equality is that we are offering something equally to every student. So we're offering every student the opportunity to come in and take a college course in Comp 1. And then equity is a little bit different because it is the focus on personalization. So with our pathways approach that we are taking, which
we're
is
really
extremely
excited
about,
Yes.
we are going to be able to personalize that experience. And so we know that that may mean that we have a certain subgroup of students that we need to put into this learning cohort, because we know that in order for them to truly be successful, we need them to pair these classes with these faculty members to be able to move them towards success. This is what their pathway to success needs to look like. So that equity piece is more of a personalization, saying that one thing will not work for all students. So let's find out, what are those components, what are those pieces that we can give students, what are those tools that will help personalize their success.
And help bring them to a more similar playing field.
Yes.
And what are some things about students that may come from an underserved background that might make things not equal? What are some of those things that our students that come from diverse backgrounds come in with, and what are the kinds of things we do to create equity?
Awesome question. So one of those things could be our first generation students. And so they have no experience with the college experience. They don't have the privilege of having parents who have already successfully navigated that system. So they're coming in with a lack of knowledge of the tools that it takes to successfully navigate our system. And so some of the things that we already have in place would be a TRIO program. So we have our Student Support Services program that they are going to provide more intrusive advisement. So they may not give them a plethora of options and say, here, look at these 228 degree and certificate programs and figure out what you want to do with it. It's going to be more personalized. It's going to narrow some of those options for them, which again fits into our Great Pathways model. And then that way we can say, we need to also provide you some further support if you're coming from a underperforming school that you graduated from. And so we know that you are going to enter in needing a little bit more developmental assistance. And so we can point you and say, we have a wonderful math lab over here that you're going to be able to do some tutoring, but in our prescriptive plan that we're developing for you, your educational plan, we're going to say, so we're going to advise you to do 6 to 8 hours of tutoring per week. And we're going to communicate. And so really moving into more of a caseload role. And that is something that with our new reorganizational plan, we're going to be able to provide to support our students, which is great.
Yeah, great.
Eunice, I wanted to ask you to go back to definitions. Sometimes people confuse or conflate the terms diversity and inclusion, and those really are two different things. What do those terms mean for us here at Tulsa Community College, and how should students think about the way that those terms are used?
Great. So diversity is a term used to be able to describe the characteristics that we generally use that will differentiate groups or individuals. So diversity, I usually say, is more of a noun. It's kind of what you have. And so it is a mix of, it can be gender differences, it can be race, ethnicity, ability versus disability, age, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, religious beliefs. So that's diversity. And then inclusion is actually, what do you do with that mix? And so how do you make that mix work is really what inclusion is. And so how are we welcoming our students? How are we engaging with our students? How are we making them feel valued? And then how are we using those differences to be able to mobilize us as an institution to really capitalize on those differences and the strengths that are inside of those differences.
And it really is about, from that first moment a student has with the first experience they have with Tulsa Community College, through their coursework, through graduation, that's where that inclusion piece, it's something that guides us all along the way in helping students navigate that process, right?
Absolutely. What do we do with the diversity? That's the inclusion piece.
Yeah.
And some communities are farther along on that than others.
Yes.
And it's really, there's the economic development piece of diversity and inclusion. And then there's just the cultural piece of it too, because it's a, talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit, do you talk to your students about what employers look for, or do you have discussions about the value of diversity and inclusion as it relates to the employment environment?
Absolutely. And so those are some of the things that we're excited to be able to develop under this new reorg, is that we will have a lot of educational trainings or workshops, is basically what we're calling for our students, to really be able to talk through their skill set, move away from this deficit-based thinking and really moving into this strength-based model of how do you market your diversity. And when we're talking about diversity, it can be diversity of knowledge, and that's a big piece that our employers are interested in. And again, it's not just diversity because you can have the diversity, but what are you going to do to capitalize on those differences that make your team stronger, because you have a diversity in the ideas that they bring to the table. And I've had faculty members talk about ways that they've used that in the classroom, bringing in, they have a section in their syllabus where the students are able to bring in particular readings or write on topics of their choice. Then they're able to share that in a group setting. So you're bringing in new sets of information and new ways of thinking and processing information. And that's where you really get that benefit as an institution and having a diverse workforce, is when they are all able to bring different perspectives to the table, different ways of processing and thinking about problems, different ways to solve those problems. And that's the key to innovation.
Well, we have just a couple of minutes left, and before Dr. Goodson asks you the big question that we ask of all of our guests, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned this earlier, that 37% of our students come from a minority population. How much do we expect that to change in the next few years, and what does that mean for our teaching and learning environment here at the college?
Great. Well, we know that by the year, I think the estimate is 2043, that our minority will be our majority. We know that Tulsa is ahead, that our Hispanic population has already doubled within the last 10 years. And so what that means for our classrooms, it just means that we need more diversity in our pedagogical approaches. We need to think differently about how we are interacting with our student. Another form of diversity, and Dr. Goodson talked about this earlier today, is the whole technology piece. When we're talking about age and our millennials and how they learn, these are things that are all going to be important. We need a certain amount of cultural competency from our staff. So we need to be able to provide training so that they can relate. Sometimes we just expect people to know how to teach to the differences, and that's not a skill set that people just automatically have. And so being able to equip our staff and our faculty to be able to meet the needs of our diverse student population is something that I'm excited that our department is going to be able to partner with our new Chief Human Resources Officer as well, and lead the college in that work, so that we can really make sure that we are equipping both our students and our faculty and staff for success.
That's going to be great to integrate those two worlds in a more meaningful way.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so here's the big question on the Big Blue Radio Show.
Okay.
And that is, if you had an opportunity to give advice to your 18-year-old self, what would it be?
Okay, so my answer is going to be based on the context that I am completing my final assignment for my class that's due Wednesday, and it's 20 pages. So my message to my 18-year-old self would be, never let self-doubt stop you. Always move forward. So that means to me, I would not be a mother, a wife, a mother of 3 children and a wife pursuing my PhD at this time. If I would have I let the fear of the GRE and thinking,
Oh, you waited to go to graduate school.
I don't
Go
think
ahead
I
and
can
go.
do it. Just go for
Just
it.
go to school.
Go
Stay
for
in
it.
school.
Continue your education. Don't take a 15-year break and go back.
Okay.
Just do it.
That's good
Absolutely.
advice.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, but I want to thank our guest, Eunice Tarver, TCC's Assistant Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion, for joining us today on the show.
And thank you for joining us. Remember, you can find us every week online at The Grid, tulsacc.edu/The Grid, and on the Creativity Channel, Cox Cable Channel 21. We'll see you next time.